I'm going to speak in Spanish since we're in El Salvador. Actually, many of the things that I want to say today, I have already heard them this morning as presentations were taking place. I was reducing the time of my own presentation because many of the topics that I want to talk about are already happening in El Salvador. I had the luck to be here in 2018, if I'm not wrong, and I remember that we were at the hotel. I don't know if it was Intercontinental or Sheraton, was one of those two, and they didn't allow us to go out at night. I came here 17 years ago as well, and they didn't allow us to go out at night. I arrived Tuesday night with my two eldest son. We arrived at 11 and we went out walking. We went walking in downtown, and I was surprised because nothing bad happened to us. And as someone who had been here before, it had a great impact. And my children told me, "Dad, but you used to tell us that El Salvador was very dangerous." But that was the past, and now things have changed. Now we have to acknowledge that security, that improvement in the lifestyle of Salvadorans. I had the opportunity to climb 3 volcanoes yesterday with my children, and I'm impressed of the changes taking place in the country. Someone told us in the morning, talk to the people. I had the chance to talk to the people there because we were changing drivers to move around the volcanoes, and there is a feeling of hope. People say, I don't have to migrate to the United States, or I return from the United States. I can be at home, my wife can be at home, we can go out, we can live the life that for us Europeans is something normal. So congratulations El Salvador, and congratulations government. It is an honor to me to participate and share some thoughts about transnational organized crime, about illicit trade and drug trafficking. During many years, the drug trafficking routes have changed a lot. Central America is still this bottleneck for cocaine, for the traffic of cocaine. Depending on the sources you check, more than 80% of the cocaine that arrives to the United States goes through this region, and some sources, like the United Nations, they talk about 90% of cocaine. That is the last report of the United Nations. There are people, when you take a look at the numbers, and I have lived in the United States, and I have a good friend of mine who lost her daughter to fentanyl. You see the number of thousands of people dying because of drugs. This is more than a war. When you were talking before about the figures of homicides in El Salvador, now take that into the context of the United States. But why does this dynamic is still there after all the efforts of the different governments, administration? I believe that there are 3 structural reasons. The first one is the geographical reason. Central American is the corridor with thousands of kilometers of coast and very open borders. The second is the institutional weakness, justice that is captive in many countries, police departments that are fragmented, and systematic corruption that operates as a criminal multiplier, and that is something that has been detained, interrogated from Venezuela, from Bolivia, banned from Nicaragua and Cuba, so I know what I'm talking about. The regional impact of this is devastating. There is an increase in the number of homicides that has sometimes reached war levels. I have worked in offices in Baghdad and other places. There are more people dying because of this war against drug than the people dying in these wars. And the second point is forced migration because of the territorial control of cartels and gangs. And I think that what happened here in El Salvador is a miracle. Mexico is an example of a country where in many areas the government is inexistent and the control is owned by cartels. So in Central America it's not not only about transit, it is also an area of conflict between the criminal organizations and the state, with repercussions on governance, development, and the security of the hemisphere. Organized crime has understood something key, and we have already discussed about this a lot. The one who dominates technology dominates the illicit market. Drones are used for the transport of small shipments and selective attacks between criminal organizations. We have cases in Mexico and in other countries in Central America, and we have already witnessed cases of drones that were modified to launch bombs or to violate security perimeters. Cryptocurrencies, criminal networks use cryptocurrencies for asset laundering and transborder laundering. Problem is not the asset itself, but the unregulated exchanges. Now, crime operates a parallel economic system that makes this asset tracking very difficult, and I know many of you understand what we're talking about. Dark web, my children, many times, especially the firstborn who studies engineering, systems engineering, he tells me that dark web is the place where you can buy digital illicit items, drug, weapons. They operate in very sophisticated environments that were previously reserved just for cartels. This criminality is decentralized and difficult to eliminate. This activity is now no longer fragmented. It is an interconnected system with actors that diversify their portfolios, just like multinational companies, sanitary products, drugs, parts that represents millions of dollars a year. There are many countries that have smaller GDPs. OECD and the Intellectual Property Office of the European Union talk about a criminal economy that is destroying more and more the regular economy. If we talk about environmental impact, we're talking about $258 million in damages each year, and we are in the fastest criminal growing market. We're talking about illegal mining, lithium illegal mining, cobalt illegal mining. If we talk about human trafficking, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because we're gonna hear about it later. Millions of minors trapped in these networks for sexual crimes in Spain. By the way, we had to include in our GDP numbers the numbers from the drug trafficking and sexual exploitation, which, as everybody knows, they don't pay taxes, and it was calculated as around 5% of the GDP. Traffic of wild species and organized crime. It's not just a bunch of isolated organizations. It's a global parallel economy with flexible alliances, capacity of innovation, and extreme resilience. Which are the strategic lines that I want to present to you today and that I invite you to think about before these evolutionary threats or policies have to evolve faster than those of criminals? First, we need integrated regional intelligence. It's not enough to share information. We need operational fusion, analytic fusion, and standards among states with common data, biometry standards, and financial traceability. Number two, technology for the state. You have already mentioned this before, and I totally agree with this. Crime cannot be better equipped than institutions. It is urgent to invest in analytics, blockchain analytics, anti-drone systems, artificial intelligence, especially especially for ports, borders, and we need to invest on better digital forensic capacities. Financial combat, dismantling and hitting the economical flow of these organizations is more effective than seizing big drug shipments, and that's why we need independent financial units. We need cooperation with private sector, and we need international regulations in different areas, and regulation in the crypto markets. And fourth, strengthening the presence of the state in the vulnerable territories. Security is not imposed by the use of the force of the police. It is built through justice, investment, and economical opportunities. That's in those places where the state is absent, crime will fill that gap. In this case, we can see the example of Mexico, for example. I think that we had the elections in Canada, Argentina. I remember elections in Peru when Castillo won office, in Bolivia when Arce won. And we talk about these areas where we have narco mayors, narco provinces, where the radical left parties won elections thanks to the support of cartels and drug dealers. And to conclude, allow me to include a less visible dimension, but a relevant one for our analysis of trans-bordering threats. Thousands of Cubans are fighting today in Ukraine. I mentioned this in a forum in Madrid. This has already been published. The government of Ukraine it's willing to deliver this Cuban prisoners in exchange of political prisoners. The government of Ukraine has the Cuban prisoners, and they have recovered the corpses of Cubans. But why is this relevant? What is happening? And what does this has to do with the? What does it have to do with the combat to organized crime? It represents the use of citizens of other countries. That is proof of the international trafficking of people. Many of these young people that were deceived are captured using networks similar to the ones used by organized crime. One of the young men was a musician. He went working to Russia, and when he arrived, he was taken. His passport was taken from him and was sent to the front. There is the cases of young men from South Sudan that were with scholarships go to St. Petersburg, but they were taken prisoners and they were sent to combat at the front. That also represents a security gap in Latin America, and especially for Central America and the Caribbean. The return of combatants with military training and PTSD, and without the appropriate mechanisms for their integration, is a factor known to be a threat for the social stability. So the region can face the appearance of new hitman networks and parallel actors. We have the most advanced combat front in Ukraine, where thousands of Cubans are fighting. Many of them will come back here, and they will be part of these cartel networks. They will have access to technology, to the use of drones, and they will have access to a new way of waging war. I think that giving the visibility to this situation and to prepare for that is something key. There was a presentation 4 weeks ago at the Senate in the United States where we talk talk about this, I encourage you to look for it and to listen to that, because it's something that is going to affect you directly. The presence of Cubans in the war on Ukraine is not an isolated fact, but it's another proof of how these networks operate, how they conduct these hybrid operations. So this reality encourages to strengthen our the regional intelligence, and to work on the control and regularization for Latin American citizens. We are facing a transnational technological criminal ecosystem, so our response must be strategic, transnational, and technological. Crime is already thinking globally, and our policies cannot continue operating locally. Thank you so much.
Victor, thank you so much. Just great.